One, two, three, four. I got thoughts running through my head. I got thoughts, can't you see? I got thoughts, the books I read. I got thoughts, won't you listen to me?
Hello, 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 and welcome to The Author Has Thoughts. I am the author in question, Gary Ballard. I have written 12 novels now. I believe it'll be 6 in the Stepping Stone cycle, which is my Cthulhu Mythos series. And then I've just completed the first draft of the 6th novel in the Bridge Chronicles series, the Cyberpunk series, which is, we'll be talking about the series today. I'll actually be talking about the last published book, the 5th book in the series called Reclamation. If you would, please, down below, click the like, subscribe, the little bell dingy thing for notifications if you like my content and want to be notified when I get more content up. This will probably be a 4 or 5, maybe 6-part series on this one novel, and then every once in a while, not really on a regular basis, I put out just some various and sundry thoughts about either, reviewing some media, maybe taking a critical examination of some form of media, or talking about politics, because I do that a lot. The book I'm discussing today is called Reclamation. It is the 5th book, the 5th novel, part 5, in the Bridge Chronicles series. There's actually 6 books in the series, which there's also a Tales from the Bridge Chronicles Volume 1, collection of short stories that's set in the Bridge Chronicles universe. And I bring that up for a couple of reasons. Number one, buy it. The other reason I would bring it up is that Reclamation actually started life as Tales from the Bridge Chronicles Volume 2. I had just completed the 3rd book in my Cthulhu Mythos series, the Stepping Stone cycle, which is complete now, and everybody should go buy it. Links below. I was like, well, Bridge Chronicles has been more successful. It's sold more. I want, for people who like the Bridge Chronicles, I want to give them some more content. Why don't I do another Tales from the Bridge Chronicles short story collection? And, because I could hopefully put one of those out pretty quickly, and then I can get back and finish the Stepping Stone cycle. I said, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll start writing the short stories, and maybe do a Patreon, or Patreon, however you say it, and put it on my website as content people can see, as I'm writing it. That didn't work out well. Nobody subscribed, which, not really surprised based on my, current sales. So I started writing the book, or writing the short stories, and I'd gotten through, I want to say 3 or 4 of them. I believe I was writing the one with Aristotle and the Technomancers and the Christmas thing. I started to think, like, all of these short stories that I've got planned for this book, because I had, a number of them planned, they all kind of tie together. And more so than just they're all in the same universe, they have some of the same characters, supporting characters for one or in others. They were all kind of merging together, and part of it was the idea of the incursion. And incursion was the idea that if we've got these worlds, these virtual worlds that people like the Bottle City Boys, they're literally living their lives online in this. It's kind of an MOG, but not really. This is not a new concept. There's been plenty of discussion among transhumanism and, other geek cultures about, basically living your life online as opposed to in a physical realm. I had thought that, the Bottle City Boys would be this virtual world. So what happens if someone attempts to invade the virtual world almost? What if there's an incursion? My first thought was, what if there's an alien incursion? But if you think about it, someone from a different virtual world trying to come into the Bottle City virtual world, that would be an alien concept. The two, like, say you're in EverQuest, if you try to take your EverQuest character to Dark Age Online or World of Warcraft or whatever, and obviously I'm dating myself, you would run into that they're written differently. They may be written in different programming languages, or if they're in the same programming language, they may have different engines and all this. So my thought was, if there's an incursion from another world, another virtual world, another transcendent world, that would be almost like an alien invasion. So that's where the idea of this incursion coming in, and being a very violent sort of event with these three figures coming in and then killing some of the guards within the virtual world. While writing it, I had the idea that, okay, the guys that are trying to come in are the reason their protocols are so off from Bottle City Boys. Most of the virtual worlds that are being used on the global net in this system are written using kind of more of a modular programming language, where they're all really in the same language. And the only difference is going to be is how it's implemented, what art assets you use, and what physics do you put on it. Is there magic? Is there not magic? What you might have it customized for specific worlds, but the baseline will be the same. It'll all be like, say, it's using Unity or all using Unreal Engine or something, to put it in current term. But as I'm writing, I'm thinking, okay, so this other world, this incursion that's coming in, I had this idea of there being a kind of pirate haven slash non-state actor, non-citizen virtual enclave. And that ended up being Fornasia, which obviously back when this was written, took a lot of ideas from 4chan and Anonymous and those kind of things. It's kind of before they split off to 8chan and basically outed themselves as incel Nazis. That's where the genesis of the Fornasia group came in, is that it would be this kind of pirate sovereign nation enclave of some of the greatest hackers in the world. So let's push it a step further, and let's make them not terrestrial bound. Let's put them, and I had thought about in the Cyberpunk 2020 universe, there were sovereign countries in orbit, some of the space stations that are orbiting the Earth. And I don't really have that. They're not at that technology level yet in the Bridge Chronicles. So I thought, well, what could they do? How about they live on a tanker, or a set of tankers that are just circling the globe, and they're controlled through the global net. But the people living on it are basically living in their creches, with the occasional sauntering out for a necessary walk, bio break, whatever. And they would be tended to by robots and drones. The Bottle City Boys discovered that the incursion is actually these Fornasia hackers that are saying, here's our lat long, here's our heading, we're sinking. Somebody come save us. And we'll come live, we'll immigrate to the Bottle City. Of course, that would bring Bridge in, which is later on in the book. And one of the things I wanted to do from a structural standpoint on this book is taken from a lot of the other cyberpunk authors, the Stevenson, Bruce Sterling, and Gibson, the big three, about not writing necessarily a completely linear narrative, from one point to the next, and it's all in one line, because I wanted to step back and look back in the history of the Bridge Chronicles world. It was one of the big events in the history and the backstory of the Bridge Chronicles world was a war in Venezuela in 2018, which, oddly enough, we almost had. If Trump had decided he really needed a war, we would have probably gone to Venezuela, because that would have been an easy war to. I say easy war to win militarily. It would have been a complete shit show like Iraq. So I wanted to play around with some timelines and go from, even when I was writing the second story, part 2, Transorganisma, which again started as a short story. And that short story I wanted to write, especially not in a linear format. I wanted to jump around in the timeline so that little bits and pieces of the story could be unfolded without having to just tell you it all was happened. Because honestly, if you go from where it starts to where it ends, you miss some context earlier in the earlier parts that is helped by having the context in the later bits. So I wanted to play around with that, and I also wanted to play around with something else that's been pretty big in the big three cyberpunk stories, is that that idea of we go from here to here to here to here. We're not always in one place. We're not always in one setting. So we would go from Venezuela, Caracas, Venezuela, to Washington, D.C., to the Bottle City, to Los Angeles, and back and forth and jump all around. But always, keep the narrative grounded and moving forward. So I came up with the character of James Nealon, who was embedded with Venezuelan troops. He was a freelance journalist embedded with Venezuelan troops during the war, and saw how they got their asses kicked and how they were basically demoralized and destroyed. And then at the end of it, when they're running from the U.S. troops, he manages to capture a video of cyber soldiers, cybernetically enhanced soldiers that at the time, and this is again in 2018, so I published this in 2016, which means I wrote it somewhere around 2015, before the election was over with. So in 2018, I thought, okay, cyber soldiers, Nealon gets to see cyber soldiers, so it wasn't too far a leap forward in the time when I was writing it to the time that I was setting it forward. And it's funny, as that timeline has passed, as we're now past 2018, into 2021, I started thinking about, I was like, okay, so all these books are written, they're published as ebooks, and all of them have been leading towards 2030 as the big date. 2028 to 2030. And clearly, a lot of the stuff like cybernetics and all that is just not there yet. It's not going to be there by that time, probably not. So should I move the timeline forward so that I'm always, it's always in the future? And, I thought about it in the context of Blade Runner / Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, both of which are set in the year 2000. Now, again, clearly those futuristic sci-fi landscapes did not happen in the year 2000. We don't have flying cars, any of that stuff. We don't have replicants. I thought about it in the context of this. Philip K. Dick wrote his novels back when he did, back in the 60s. And he said his stuff 40 years in the future. When I started writing and thinking about this universe, I was setting mine about 40 years in the future. Probably not thinking about the time that by the time I got it published, it might be almost 40 years in the future. But I thought, well, okay, so what? So I'm off on my timeline. Let's just say it's an alternate history. At some point, every novel is an alternate history, right? Because if you're writing in the 60s, a contemporary novel, about something that doesn't happen, then by the time I'm reading it in the 90s or the 2000s, it's alternate history. So I decided I wasn't going to get hung up on that. It's like, here's the timeline. This is what it is. If by the time I finish writing the Bridge Chronicles stuff, it's already past 2030, I don't really care. It's not a big deal. Read it as a story that's, hopefully fun and entertaining and has some interesting thoughts to it. But let's not worry too much about whether or not it's, accurate to the timeline. Because nothing ever is. James Nealon, the freelance journalist, discovers these cyber soldiers, videos them, and then has to try to find a way out of Venezuela to America because he can't, the place is closed down communication-wise. He can't get his story out to the publishers, and so he has to figure a way out of Venezuela so he can just get this story out without it being censored, muted, whatever. And to do that, he manages to contact a programmer called Stack Zero, Stack Overflow. Basically, I took it from Stack Overflow, the website. But this guy leads him along a merry chase, gets him passage on an oil rig, because as soon as Caracas fell, there were oil tankers out, owned by multinationals, out in the harbor, waiting to come in and grab the oil, as much as they could before that stopped. Stack gets him the fake credentials, but tells him, okay, in order for this to happen, you've got to do this for me. And what that is he sneaks aboard one of the tankers and implants some software on it while he's doing it, he discovers he's not the only one doing that. Somebody else is doing it on another tanker, and 2 or 3 tankers manage to get out of Caracas Harbor and disappear. And that ends up being where Fornasia lives, and those are the ships that are sinking when, at the beginning of the story, when we found out about the Incursion.